Why, good morning. Okay. How do you like the rustic look? Yes. So I'm in the garage today. Hey, you never know what we're going to be doing here at Coffee with Carrie. All right. So I am going live this morning. Today is our high school huddle. So we're going to be talking about all things high school. So I have the live chat going so that if you have any questions, you can put them in there and then I will answer them as we go. And I'm going to record this so that it'll be up. Some of you, I know, we're just so rustic today. I love it. Okay. Some of you already sent in some questions. And of course, when I meet with clients about homeschooling the high school years, there's always several questions that come up. So I'll talk about those questions and the ones that you guys sent in until we get some live chat questions over there. And if we don't, then we'll just cut it short. Okay. So before we get started, I got my purple straw. I don't know. Do you have your coffee? I'm out in the garage today, so I thought I would do an iced one over here. And if you're not familiar with the purple straw, it's coffee bean. Absolutely love the purple straw over the green straw. And if you're a coffee drinker, you know what I'm talking about. All right. So let us first get into the first question that someone had sent in. And I love this question. It's actually a question that I addressed in my high school book called Homeschool High School. And it's also a whole chapter that I just finished my final edits on my new book that's coming out in January, because this question comes up so much, especially in the high school years. And one of those questions is, will there be holes in my child or my teens education? So since we're talking about high school today, we're going to focus more on the teens today. Okay. Now, those of you who have been to my high school seminar or you read my book, you already know my answer. It's a truthful, very transparent answer. And it is, yeah, there's going to be probably holes in your teens education. That's the hard, honest truth. But if we think about it, there's going to be holes in every high schooler's education, whether they go to a traditional high school, whether they homeschool at home, um, whether they go to a private school. It's such a daunting task. We cannot teach our kids everything that they absolutely, quote unquote, need to know before they graduate. All right. Now, one other thing to think about is keep in mind some of the naysayers or the critics, or even some of the well meaning family members that tell us we're not qualified to teach our high schoolers high school at home. Is because we're not credentialed or we're not experts in all of the different areas. Or, hey, sometimes they even say we're not smart enough or organized to do it because we're not credentialed, right? Or we have a degree in a certain thing. But keep in mind, a lot of these naysayers and critics, especially the more harsh ones, um, they're actually criticizing those of us who are products of the public and private school. We are graduates of the public and private school. And so apparently, the education we got over here in the traditional school system apparently wasn't good enough because we're not smart enough or know enough in order to teach our kids in high school. All right. So think about where it's coming from and what that actually says. Okay. Um, but also, for me, maybe this isn't true for you, but for me, there were a ton of holes in my education when I graduated high school. Now, I'm going to take like 80%, 70% blame for that. I didn't take high school probably as seriously as I should have, or as my mom and dad wanted me to take it. So, my high school education, there were a lot of holes, a lot on my part. However, there were also a lot of holes in my education because one, many of the teachers I had, bless their hearts, I'm from the South, I can say that, bless their hearts, they tried the best they could. Some didn't try at all, but they just weren't really good teachers, or they were using curriculum that Wasn't that great? Um, Definitely in the earlier years, they weren't teaching to my learning style, right? Because they had to stay on pace and do standards and things like that. They moved way too quickly than they needed to. So, yes, some of the blame of having holes, at least in my education, were was the system I was in and some of the teachers. Like I said, a lot of them were great, but there's only so much you can do in a classroom setting. And then I did have some teachers who, were teaching history, who weren't history quote unquote experts, right? And that's what some of the comments are about us. And then also, there were holes in my education just because of the way the system was set up. Even though back then we were in school 7 hours a day, they just couldn't cover everything they were supposed to cover, right? And so the standards and the goals were just really too unrealistic. All right. So I didn't realize just how many holes there were in my education, or as I like to say sometimes, just how dumb I was until I started homeschooling my own kids. And I realized, wow, I missed that in history class, or wow, when did that become a science thing? Or I can't even tell you, I'm not even going to start telling you just how many holes there were in my math skills and my financial literacy skills, right? When I graduated high school. Now, did I do okay? Yeah, I think I did pretty good. I personally went off to college, and that's actually when I blossomed. So I did fine in college. I graduated, top of my class, went back and got a master's. So having holes in my high school and lower grad education didn't affect me because by the time I got to college, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew how to think. I knew how to learn, and I wanted to learn, right? And the things that I didn't know or I wasn't taught in high school, or the things that I probably was taught but didn't listen or remember, I figured it out and taught myself, right? Okay, so I think that story is very similar to many of you out there. You probably can say there were a lot of holes in your own personal education. Now, some of you who are second generational homeschoolers, and bless you, not bless your heart, bless you for homeschooling your own kids. Maybe there were some holes. I'm sure there were holes in your own education as a homeschool graduate. Okay, and I'm sure there's different reasons for that too. But all of that to say, there are going to be holes in your child's education when they graduate. So that's why, especially nowadays, futurists tell us that 85% of the jobs that our kids and kids coming up that they will have in the year of 2030, 85% of those jobs have not been invented yet. Okay, have not been invented yet. So if your student is college bound or workforce bound, or will be managing a household as a dad or as a mom, those kind of skills we can teach them. But if they're going out in the workforce and they're going off to college, and 85% of the jobs, that they might have not even been invented yet. How in the world, as their mom, as their parent, as their teacher, can we teach them those skills and prepare them for those careers if we don't even know what those careers are and the type of skills that they will need in order to succeed in those? Okay. So that's why it brings us back to, will there be holes in their education? Yes. Then what should we be teaching them? I really think by the time a student, what you should be working on in the high school years, and by the time they graduate high school, um, to offset those holes, like maybe they didn't do great in chemistry, or maybe they didn't do great in geometry or physics, or maybe you didn't do a whole lot of history, whatever it is, okay? To offset those holes, it's more important to teach our teens how to learn, how to find answers when they don't know them, how to teach themselves, right? And how to think critically. If they can do those four things and hopefully still have a love of learning and develop this idea of being a lifelong learner, if we could instill those things in them and teach them those skills, they are going to do way better than the cookie cutter kid that's coming out of the traditional high school system down the street, who's, taking all these different AP classes. But, you know, that's all I'm going to say. Okay. So, what should you be focusing on during the high school years? We'll talk about, what your state might require, but really the five major skills you should be helping them instill and learn is how to learn, how to find answers to questions they don't know, how to teach themselves, um, and then to develop this love of learning. Okay. And critical thinking skills. Those are the skills that are going to take them either into college or into the workforce or both. Okay. So if they come out being able to do those things, whatever holes there are, if they find in a college class or to get a particular degree or to work in a particular industry or to get a particular job, if they don't have a particular skill or knowledge that maybe they were supposed to learn in high school, or maybe it hadn't been invented yet for them to learn in high school, if they know how to learn, right? If they know how to find answers, if they can say, I don't know, but I can go teach myself how to do that, right? They can think critically and they still enjoy learning, they're going to do just fine. They're actually going to do even better than fine. Okay. So if you are worried about that question, will there be holes in my child's education? Just chill about it and focus more on those five things than the actual making sure they do traditional chemistry or they get an A in physics and things like that. Okay. Now, just to kind of prove my point about the 85% of the jobs in the year 2030, futurists tell us, have not been invented yet. I'm going to take you back. I'm going to be back to the future kind of a girl here. Back in the 80s, when I was in high school, and then the first in college, and then even the first year of my teaching, when I was in high school, there was a computer. Personal computers were just coming out. They were those huge things, right? That sat on your desk with the green screen. So personal computers were just coming out, but they couldn't do half the things that our computers do now. Okay. There was no such thing as the internet. There was absolutely no such thing as iPhones, apps. There wasn't AI. Okay. And if there was AI, the government was creating it over here. We didn't have access to it. Okay. That's all I'm saying. So all of those things that we rely heavily on today, and a lot of the professions that people have today in those fields, computer programming was just a field that was up and coming when I was in high school. Like I said, there was no such thing as apps. There was gaming, but it was Atari. So it wasn't quite what it is today. Okay. We didn't have social media, none of that stuff. So how was I supposed to teach my students when I became a teacher those skills that would be needed for those types of jobs in that industry when it hadn't really even been invented or it hadn't taken off yet? And the answer is I couldn't, right? But by teaching them how to learn, how to think, how to solve problems, how to teach themselves, and to make learning fun enough that they loved learning and they wanted to continue doing it, I can now say, as a retired classroom teacher, many of my students that I had way back when, not going to tell you when, but I'm not going to date myself, they are in those fields and doing those things. Okay. And no thanks to me, because even though I taught them math and science, I didn't teach them any of those skills. Okay. All right. Now, the other thing that a lot of critics will say is, Carrie, you don't have a degree in science, or you didn't, I'm going to be a little honest here. I failed high school geometry, had to take it a second time. I barely got through high school chemistry. Even though I knew I wanted to be a teacher, I was relieved, and it solidified my decision to become a teacher when I found out that teachers in college didn't have to take college algebra. They had to take math for teachers. So I literally picked my career based on not having to take college algebra and not having to take chemistry and physics and things like that. Okay. And if you listened a second ago, you heard that I was a middle school math and science teacher. So let's just say once I got to college, the light bulb went on and I finally understood these things and loved them and wanted to teach them. But anyway, I digress. Hold on, let me take a sip of my purple straw. Okay, so a lot of critics will say, well, Carrie, you're awful in geometry, or you barely pass chemistry. How can you teach that to your kids? Okay, well, when they're in high school, there are a couple of things that you could do. One, you could be transparent enough and model being a lifelong learner and looking at your student, your teen, and saying, look, I don't remember this stuff, or I don't know this, but let's learn it together. And then both of you sit down and learn the chemistry together or learn the geometry together. That's going to go a long way. Now, if that totally made you break out in hives because you've been there, done that, and you don't want to do high school chemistry ever again, okay, because it makes your stomach hurt. All right, totally get it. Then in high school, when you're homeschooling, because you have the freedom and flexibility, there are so many other things that you could do if you're not the one who's actually going to teach them that one particular subject, right? So you can outsource it. And there's many ways that you can outsource things in the homeschooling community. So they could do something online. They could do a dual enrollment class if that's their gifting, and they could start taking some college classes there. Maybe your local co-op offers a chemistry class or a biology class or a geometry class, and they could do it that way. Okay. Also, remember, one of the things that we want to teach our kids in high school, where we're not focusing so much on skills and concepts and facts and things like that, we're focusing on how to learn, how to teach ourselves critical thinking skills, right? Then if your student's up for it and they have the aptitude for it, or it's their learning style, you could literally give them the textbook or the curriculum and say, here you go, teach yourself. Use some YouTube videos if you need them. Listen to some TED Talks if you need to. But they could literally teach themselves. So there's all kinds of ways that you can have your student, your teen, learn something in high school that maybe your state requires them to learn without you actually being an expert in it. All right. Now let's also think about the traditional school, high school down the street. Does every teacher teach every subject? No, right? So they're going to have an expert, quote unquote, expert who's going to teach the chemistry and the physics and the bio. And then they're going to have their expert who only teaches math. And then they're going to have their expert who only teaches government, right? Okay. So look at it that way too. We're no different in the homeschooling community. If there's an area you are an expert in, you definitely want to make sure you're teaching your kid that area because you know it, you love it, and it's going to ooze through everything you do. If you're not an expert in it, find a friend who is, find a relative who is, outsource it like we talked about to someone who is, okay? Or learn it alongside your kid or encourage them to teach themselves, right? Okay. These are the skills that will go with them for a lifetime, that will help them in college if they decide to go to college, or help them in any field that they decide to go into. Okay. So I know that was a very long answer to that very one question of, will there be holes in my child's education? But the answer is yes. And hopefully, my answer has relieved some of your fears and some of your stress about that. Okay. Another question that someone had sent in for me that they wanted me to discuss is, what does a typical high school day look like? And I kind of had to chuckle at that question. It's a great question, but I had to chuckle because reflecting on my own experience when we were homeschooling, I had 2 kids, and I can't even say that my daughter's typical high school day was the same as my son's typical high school day. So even 2 kids with the same teacher in the same homeschool, basically learning a lot of the same things, even their days were quite different from each other, right? So, all that to say, there's really not going to be, or there really isn't a typical or normal high school day when you're homeschooling, okay? But there might be some sort of same rhythm or some same pattern to it, okay? So, first of all, keep in mind that your high schooler is going to get through whatever work he or she is supposed to do in any method that you do as a homeschooler. So whether you're a Charlotte Mason homeschooler, a classical homeschooler, a traditional homeschooler, an unschooler, whatever your approach is, okay, they're going to get through whatever it is that they need to do that day or that week in way less time than their friend who goes to the traditional public or private school down the street. Okay. So keep in mind that those kids are in school 7 to 8 hours now. They even have zero period. And then they come home and they have 2 or 3 hours on average of homework to do because they didn't finish a lot of the work they were supposed to do during the 6, 7, 8 hours they were in school. Okay. Your student is going to get through all of the things that you need them to do or they want to do in way less time. Mainly because when you're homeschooling, you have the freedom and flexibility to learn what you want, how you want to learn it, when you want to learn it, where you want to learn it, right? Okay. So you're not going to have all of those other interruptions that they're going to have in the traditional school system. Okay. So on average, keep on, this is an average. A typical high school day, depending on what method of homeschooling you use, is going to be about 3 hours for a high schooler. Okay. And that's way less than what's happening down the street. Now, statistically, when studies are done, and they actually have done many, many statistics, and I talk about these statistics in my upcoming book and in my high school book that came out last year, that when researchers actually tallied up how much instructional time was happening in the classrooms in a traditional classroom, it was less than 20 minutes a class. And then when they averaged all that up, really in a 7 to 8 hour school day, they were really only getting about 3.3 hours of instruction. All right. So when you think about it, we as homeschoolers, we don't work harder, we work smarter. We're able to get all that stuff done, whatever it is, in the same amount of time or a little bit less. Okay. Now, also, so the day is going to be about 3 hours on average. It might be a little less, might be a little bit more, depending on what they're doing. Okay. But basically, they're going to be probably doing some sort of morning routine with you and the family, whether that's breakfast, morning devotions, their Bible study. Maybe they like to go to the gym or do some exercise first in the morning or whatever. Okay. So there's going to be some sort of morning time routine there, their chores, personal hygiene, that kind of stuff. If you do morning time as a family, I encourage you to include your teen as much as possible still in that morning time, even if some of it is way below them, mainly because the younger siblings will miss hanging out with your teen because they will be doing an awful lot on their own and independently. Okay. And so it's good to kind of keep them in there. And if you are more of a Charlotte Mason, more of a classical, more of a unit study or eclectic unschooling kind of a family, you're probably already learning history and science and art and music all together as a family, including your teen. So your teen's probably going to be doing a little bit of time, at least in the morning with you and the family, some sort of learning together, right? And then after that is when they usually go off and they do their quote unquote independent work, whatever that might be, right? So maybe they're taking a class online for environmental science because maybe they want to be a park ranger or something. Okay. Maybe they are teaching themselves algebra 1 using maybe Saxon or with Nicole the math lady, right? Okay. They're doing maybe history with you. They're a violinist or a pianist or something like that. So they're spending time on that. Maybe they have a job or they run their own business. And so they're working on that. And, maybe they're doing some writing assignments for you or for an outside class or just for fun, whatever. So they're going to be working on those things probably independently, wherever and however they do their work. And depending on what they're doing and the level of the work that's required, that's probably going to take them another hour to 2 hours, right? So that's what their day kind of looks like. Depending on their learning style, they're going to be taking breaks when they need it, depending on their activities and their passions that they're interested in. Maybe one whole day or 2 whole days out of the week, they're at the ranch or they're at the stables. And so they don't do quote unquote school at all on those days because they are doing their equestrian stuff, which means the other 3 days they're doubling up on their quote unquote schoolwork, right? So those days might be longer, right? All right. But all that to say, a typical day, they can probably get things done in 3 hours or less, okay, which leaves an awful lot of time. And that's why a lot of moms will also ask the question, am I doing enough? Are my kids doing enough? Because they seem to finish everything in much shorter time than their friends who are in high school. And yes, that is a good thing because that's the other beauty of homeschooling the high school years. They have so much more time during their day to discover their passions, to work on their gifts, to discover their purpose, to figure out what it is that they're good at, what they're not good at, what they want to do, maybe as a profession or as a hobby, but maybe what they want to do, maybe in college or in the workforce or whatever. And so they have this extra time to work on those skills, to do the things that bring them joy, and to develop those passions. Okay. So that's pretty much what a typical day looks like. You never have to worry really about socialization in the high school years either, because teens, for the most part, tend to be very busy with outside activities, usually depending on their passions, right? So if they're dancers, they're constantly going to be at the studio. If they're into karate and martial arts, they're constantly going to be at the dojo. If they're sports or athletes, they're constantly going to be with their teams or with their coaches. If they're coding kids, they're going to be off with their friends, gaming and creating games and doing apps and things like that. If they're skateboarders and things like that, they're going to be doing those things. If they're musicians, if they volunteer at church, they're going to be spending lots of time on those things. And so when they do those things outside the home or with their friends, that's where they're building a lot of their relationships and their friendships. That's where they find their mentors. That's sometimes where they find their internships. It also gives them a lot of time to actually get a quote unquote real job where they're learning soft skills and working and dealing with customers and bosses and fellow employees and all of those kind of interpersonal relationships. So you never have to worry really about socialization when they're in high school. All right. So hopefully, I know we only went through 2 questions here. I was a little long-winded. Maybe it was because I had a lot of the purple straw, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a coffee bean. It's on the West Coast over here. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me today. We're going to be doing a whole lot more of these high school huddles live on YouTube. And so make sure you subscribe to Coffee with Carrie Homeschool Help channel so that you're notified when we go live. All right. See you guys again.